Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Enigma. Here we share real-life experiences of encounters with the unknown, stories that come from beyond the stars, crafted to help you relax and drift off to sleep. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I love seeing just how far this mystery reaches. Now find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let yourself be carried away. Story 1. It wasn't the first time the hallway light flickered at odd intervals. Comings and goings were routine, a shuffle of footsteps that no one bothered to track. The mail piled neatly, except for the one envelope that always seemed to be missing. I didn't turn to see or ask who took it. It simply belonged somewhere else. The room felt a degree cooler than it should have been, and the curtains hung just a bit unevenly. I adjusted the blinds without thinking much of it. When I left, I made sure the blinds were uneven again. To whoever finds this letter, if anyone ever does. I'm writing this because I can't carry it anymore. The weight of what I've never told anyone, what I've never even whispered to myself in the dark hours when sleep refuses to come. My hands shake as I write this, not from fear exactly, but from something deeper. Relief, maybe, or resignation. I've kept this secret for so long that it's become part of me, like a second heartbeat that only I can hear. But secrets have a way of eating you from the inside, don't they? They hollow you out until you're just a shell walking through the world, pretending to be whole. You need to know that I was ordinary before this happened, painfully, beautifully ordinary. I worried about mundane things, whether I'd left the stove on, if I'd remembered to water the plants, why my reflection looked tired even after a full night's sleep. I lived in the spaces between moments, comfortable in my small routines, my predictable patterns. But something changed, something shifted in the fabric of my everyday existence, and I can't unsee it, can't unfeel it. It started with the humming. Not a tune exactly, more like the sound electricity makes when it runs through old wiring, a vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I'd hear it in the early hours, that space between night and morning when the world holds its breath. At first I thought it was the building settling, the pipes expanding, the refrigerator cycling on and off. But the humming had a pattern, a rhythm that felt almost intentional. I'd lie in bed counting the intervals, 3 short pulses, then silence, 7 long ones, then silence again. Always the same sequence, night after night. I started keeping a notebook by my bedside, marking down the times, trying to make sense of it. The pages filled with desperate scratches, numbers that meant nothing and everything. The humming would stop the moment I got up to investigate. Complete silence, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to give up and return to bed. But I could feel it there, lurking in the walls, patient as a predator. Sleep became elusive. I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster that seemed to form new patterns each night. Sometimes they looked like rivers viewed from above, sometimes like veins under pale skin, sometimes like roads leading to places I'd never been but somehow recognized. My reflection started looking wrong. Not dramatically wrong, I wasn't losing my mind, not in any obvious way, just off. My eyes seemed deeper set, shadowed in a way that makeup couldn't fix. My smile felt foreign on my face, like I was borrowing someone else's expression. I'd catch glimpses of myself in store windows and wonder who that person was, walking around wearing my life. The people in my building began to feel different too. Not unfriendly, exactly, but distant in a way they hadn't been before. The woman who used to nod good morning now looked through me as if I were made of glass. The man who always held the elevator door would let it close just as I approached, not out of malice, but as if he simply didn't see me there. I started questioning everything. Had they ever really acknowledged me? Had those small interactions been real, or had I imagined the warmth I thought I'd felt from strangers? The missing envelope became a daily mystery. Every morning I'd check the mail slot, and every morning one piece would be gone. Not stolen, that would have been too simple, too explainable. Gone as if it had never existed, leaving only the faintest impression in my memory. A white rectangle that should have been there but wasn't. I asked the mail carrier about it once. He looked at me with genuine confusion, as if I'd asked him about delivering letters to the moon. Said he'd never noticed anything missing, never had any complaints, but his eyes held something else, a flicker of recognition that he quickly shuttered away. The temperature changes became more pronounced. I'd walk from one room to another and feel the air shift around me, growing thick and heavy, then suddenly thin and brittle. I bought 3 different thermometers, convinced there was something wrong with my heating system. They all read the same temperature, even as goosebumps rose on my arms and my breath began to mist. My body was changing too, in ways too subtle for anyone else to notice. My fingernails grew faster than they ever had, requiring daily trimming. My hair felt different, coarser, somehow more alive. I'd wake up with strands wound around my fingers as if they'd been reaching for something in the dark. Food began to taste muted, like I was experiencing it through a filter. Colors seemed slightly washed out, as if someone had adjusted the contrast on reality itself. Music sounded distant, even when played at full volume. I was becoming unstuck from the world, one sense at a time. The dreams were the worst part. Not nightmares, those I could have handled, could have dismissed as stress or poor digestion. These were dreams of normalcy, of the life I'd been living before the humming started. Dreams where I was solid and real and seen by everyone around me. Dreams where the mail came complete, where the temperature stayed constant, where my reflection smiled back with familiar warmth. I'd wake from these dreams crying, mourning a life I wasn't sure I'd ever actually lived. The blinds became my ritual, my one small act of rebellion against whatever was happening to me. Every time I left the apartment, I'd make sure they were uneven, slightly askew. A tiny imperfection in an increasingly perfect, sterile existence. When I returned, they'd always be straight, properly aligned, as if invisible hands had corrected my small defiance. But I kept doing it, day after day, a meaningless gesture that felt like the only proof I still existed. I tried to research what was happening to me, but how do you search for something that has no name? How do you describe the feeling of slowly dissolving, of becoming translucent in your own life? The internet offered nothing but conspiracy theories and medical conditions that didn't fit. Forums full of people describing experiences that were similar but not quite the same. I wasn't disappearing exactly, I was becoming optional. My job continued as normal, or what passed for normal. I showed up, completed my tasks, received my paycheck, but conversations felt scripted, as if everyone was reading from a play I hadn't been given the lines to. My contributions to meetings were acknowledged with polite nods that felt automatic, reflexive. I began to wonder if I'd always been this peripheral, this forgettable, and was only now becoming aware of it. Maybe nothing had changed except my perception. Maybe I'd always been a background character in other people's stories, and something had simply removed the comfortable illusion that I was the protagonist of my own life. The humming evolved, became more complex. New patterns emerged, sometimes rapid bursts like Morse code, sometimes long, sustained tones that seemed to resonate in my bones. I stopped trying to decode it and started listening to it like music, letting it wash over me in the dark hours. It was almost beautiful in its alien way. My handwriting began to change. The letters grew smaller, more precise, as if I were trying to take up less space on the page. I'd catch myself writing notes that I didn't remember, composing grocery lists with items I didn't eat, appointments with doctors whose names I didn't recognize, phone numbers that led to disconnected lines. The missing envelope became a comfort rather than a mystery. At least something was consistent, even if that consistency was absence. I started leaving earlier each morning, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever force was responsible, but I never saw anything, just the empty space where a piece of mail should have been. Mirrors became unreliable. Sometimes my reflection appeared a fraction of a second after I did, like a delayed echo. Sometimes it seemed to be looking at something just over my shoulder, something I couldn't see when I turned around. I stopped making eye contact with myself, focusing instead on practical tasks, brushing my teeth, combing my hair, washing my face. But I could feel my reflection watching me, waiting for something I couldn't name. Sleep, when it came, brought no rest. I drift off to the sound of humming and wake to silence so complete it felt aggressive. The space between sleeping and waking stretched longer each night, filled with half-formed thoughts and sensations that dissolved the moment I tried to grasp them. I started leaving the lights on, but even that didn't help. The darkness wasn't coming from outside, it was growing from within, spreading through me like ink through water. My phone stopped ringing, not broken, not disconnected, just silent. The few times I tried to call out, the connections felt hollow, as if I were speaking into a void. Text messages went unanswered, not ignored, but somehow undelivered, floating in digital limbo. I was becoming a ghost in my own life, haunting spaces I'd once inhabited with confidence and purpose. The building itself seemed to be forgetting me. Doors that had always opened smoothly now stuck slightly, as if they weren't quite sure whether to admit me. The elevator would pause for just a moment too long when I pressed the button, as if calculating whether I deserved passage. Even my own apartment felt uncertain about my presence. Objects would be moved slightly, not dramatically, just enough to make me question whether I'd left them that way. Books would be closed when I was sure I'd left them open. Lights would be off when I remembered turning them on. I wasn't being haunted, I was becoming the haunting. The realization came slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape I didn't recognize. I wasn't the victim of some supernatural phenomenon, I was the phenomenon itself. Whatever was happening to me, I was both the observer and the observed, the haunted and the ghost. But knowing this didn't make it easier. If anything, it made the isolation more complete. How do you explain to someone that you're slowly ceasing to exist in any meaningful way? How do you ask for help when you're not sure you're real enough to deserve it? The humming stopped. One night, without warning or explanation, the building fell completely silent. The absence of sound was more disturbing than the mysterious vibrations had ever been. I lay awake, straining to hear something, anything, that would confirm I still existed in a world that made noise. But there was nothing, just the hollow echo of my own breathing, and even that seemed muffled, distant. I got up and walked through my apartment, touching objects to confirm they were still solid, still real. The walls felt thin under my fingertips, as if they were made of paper rather than plaster and wood. The floor seemed to give slightly under my weight, like walking on a trampoline stretched too tight. Everything was dissolving, including me. I tried to write in my journal that night, but the words wouldn't come. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I couldn't remember how to form letters that meant anything. My handwriting looked like a foreign language, symbols that might have been beautiful if I could understand them. The missing envelope appeared. For the first time since this all began, there was no gap in the mail. Every piece was accounted for, neatly stacked and properly delivered. I stared at the complete pile for a long time, trying to understand what this meant. Had whatever force been taking my mail finally finished its collection? Had it simply lost interest? Or had I finally become invisible enough that there was no longer any mail addressed to me? I don't know how long I have left, not in the dramatic sense I'm not dying, not in any way that would show up on medical tests or death certificates. I'm just fading, becoming optional in a world that's learning to function without me. This letter is my attempt to leave some proof that I existed, that I was here, that I mattered enough to be afraid of disappearing. Maybe whoever finds this will understand something I never could. Maybe they'll see patterns I was too close to recognize. Or maybe this letter will join the missing mail, vanishing into whatever space holds all the lost and forgotten things. My reflection is barely visible now. I have to strain to see it, and even then it's more suggestion than image. A shimmer in the glass, a disturbance in the silver backing. I wave, and something waves back, but I can't be sure it's connected to me anymore. The blinds straighten themselves now even when I'm watching. Slow, deliberate movements that no longer pretend to be natural. Whatever force has been reshaping my reality has grown bold, confident that I'm too faded to resist or even fully witness its work. I should be terrified, but instead I feel a strange peace. There's something liberating about letting go, about accepting that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. I spent so much energy trying to understand what was happening to me that I forgot to simply experience it. The humming has returned, but it's different now. Gentler, almost welcoming, like a lullaby sung in a language I'm just beginning to understand. It doesn't come from the walls anymore, it comes from everywhere and nowhere, a vibration that exists in the spaces between things. I think I'm ready. Ready to let go of the solid world, the world of fixed temperatures and reliable reflections and mail that arrives complete. Ready to exist in the margins, in the pauses between words, in the flicker of lights that no one bothers to investigate. Maybe this is what I was meant for all along. Maybe some people are born to be background music, to be the barely perceptible presence that others sense but never quite see. Maybe I was never supposed to be substantial in the way that others are substantial. If you're reading this, you're more real than I am now. Hold on to that reality. Treasure your solid reflection, your reliable shadow, your place in the world that no one questions. Don't take for granted the weight of your footsteps or the warmth of your breath or the way people's eyes focus when they look at you. Don't adjust the blinds. Don't listen too carefully to the sounds your building makes in the dark. Don't count the pieces of mail. And if you start to feel like you're fading, like you're becoming optional in your own life, don't fight it the way I did. Don't exhaust yourself trying to prove you exist. Sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones that can barely be seen, the ones that exist in the peripheral vision of the world. I'm going to stop writing now, not because I've said everything I need to say, but because the words are becoming harder to form, harder to believe in. My handwriting is so small now that I have to squint to read what I've written. Soon it will be too small for anyone to see. But maybe that's okay. Maybe some messages are meant to be whispered rather than shouted, felt rather than read. The humming is getting louder, or maybe I'm getting quieter. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. The sound is beautiful now, complex and layered like a symphony composed of silence and shadow. I think it's calling me home to whatever place exists for people like me, people who were never quite solid enough for this world. I'm not afraid anymore, I'm curious. What does it feel like to exist entirely in the spaces between things? What do you see when you're invisible? What do you hear when you're silent? I guess I'm about to find out. If you ever think you see something moving in your peripheral vision, if you ever feel like someone is standing just behind you, but no one's there when you turn around, if you ever sense a presence that's more absence than presence. Maybe that's me, maybe that's all of us who couldn't quite figure out how to be solid in a solid world. We're not gone, just elsewhere, existing in the margins of your reality, in the flicker of lights and the gaps in conversation and the mail that never quite arrives. We're the optional ones, and maybe that's exactly what the world needs. Story 2. I had been watching the floorboards, eyes tracing the familiar lines where the wood met the wall. The shadows didn't shift, but something in the air felt charged, like a held breath. Outside, a gust of wind brushed against the windows, a soft murmur that might have been mistaken for an echo. Each tick of the ceiling fan seemed amplified, its rhythm oddly irregular. My gaze caught the edge of the bookshelf, where the dust had settled uniformly, untouched. Yet something had changed, an inexplicable lightness in the room. That's when I noticed the single bookmark lying on the floor, and that it was never mine. The mornings have become different. I wake with the taste of copper pennies on my tongue, and my hands smell like ozone. There's a ringing in my left ear that comes and goes, but it's not really ringing. It's more like the memory of a sound that hasn't happened yet. When I press my palm against the bathroom mirror, the glass feels warm, even though the room is cold, even though it's always cold now. I keep finding myself standing in doorways, not remembering how I got there. The hallway stretches longer than it should, and the carpet fibers catch light differently. Sometimes there are impressions in the pile like footsteps, but they're too wide, too deep. When I kneel to examine them, my knees sink into the fabric, and for a moment the house holds its breath. There were lights behind the trees. The coffee mug sits on the kitchen counter, half full, steam still rising. I don't remember making coffee. The liquid inside is darker than it should be, almost black, with an iridescent film on the surface that swirls when I breathe on it. The smell is wrong too, not bitter, but sharp, like the air before lightning strikes. I pour it down the drain, and the water runs clear, but the metallic scent lingers on my fingers for hours. My reflection in the window shows me standing in the kitchen, but behind me the room looks different. The walls seem farther apart, and there's a doorway that shouldn't exist. When I turn around, everything is normal. The familiar cabinets, the same chipped tile, the refrigerator humming its steady tune. But when I look back at the window, the reflection shows the other room again, and this time something moves in that impossible doorway. The bookmark was leather, worn smooth at the edges. When I picked it up, it was warm, body temperature, as if someone had just been holding it. There were no markings on it, no text or design, just smooth brown leather that felt too soft, too alive. I set it on the bookshelf, but the next morning it was on the floor again, in exactly the same spot. I don't remember ever coming back. Sleep comes in fragments now. I close my eyes and find myself standing in a field I've never seen, under a sky that's too bright, too white. The grass beneath my feet doesn't bend when I walk, and there's no horizon, just endless pale green stretching in all directions. The air tastes like metal and something else, something organic and warm. When I try to look up at the source of the light, my vision blurs, and I wake with tears on my cheeks and that copper taste flooding my mouth. The ceiling fan spins counterclockwise sometimes. I've watched it for hours, counting the rotations, but the blades seem to skip beats, jumping forward or sliding backward in time. The pulled chain sways without any breeze, tracing patterns in the air that almost make sense, like a language written in motion. When I reach up to touch it, my fingers pass through empty space, even though I can see it swinging. There's a humming that comes from inside the walls, not electrical, not mechanical, but something deeper, more rhythmic. It starts just as I'm falling asleep and builds until the whole house seems to vibrate with it. I press my ear to the drywall and the sound stops, but I can feel it continuing in my bones, in the spaces between my ribs. The paint is warm against my cheek, and when I pull away, there's a faint outline of my face left behind, like condensation on glass. The noise didn't come from outside. In the bathroom, the mirror fogs up without any steam. Shapes form in the condensation, not quite letters, not quite pictures, but something in between. They look familiar, like symbols I should recognize but can't quite place. When I wipe them away, they reappear immediately, clearer this time, more insistent. My reflection looks tired, older somehow, with shadows under my eyes that weren't there before. The bookmark appears in different places now. On the kitchen counter next to my keys, tucked between the pages of a magazine I never read. Once I found it in my coat pocket, still warm, still soft, with what felt like a pulse beating faintly in the leather. I threw it away, buried it deep in the garbage, but the next morning it was back on the bookshelf, waiting. I keep losing time, minutes, sometimes hours, just gone. I'll be washing dishes, and suddenly the sun has moved across the sky and my hands are dry, the dishes already put away. There are tasks completed that I don't remember doing, notes written in my handwriting that I don't remember writing, phone calls made to numbers I don't recognize, though the call log shows them lasting for minutes, sometimes an hour or more. The field comes back in dreams, but it's changing. The grass is taller now, reaching my waist, and it whispers when I move through it. The light above is closer, more focused, and I can almost make out shapes within it, forms that shift and pulse like living things. The air is thicker here, harder to breathe, and when I open my mouth to call out, no sound emerges, but something answers anyway. There were lights behind the trees, and they were waiting. My skin tingles at random moments, like static electricity building up, but there's no discharge, just the constant sensation of energy flowing beneath the surface. When I touch doorknobs, light switches, anything metal, the feeling intensifies, spreading up my arm and into my chest. Sometimes I can see it, faint blue threads dancing between my fingers, connecting me to everything I touch. The house settles differently now. Creaks and groans come from rooms I'm not in, footsteps on stairs when I'm sitting still. The sounds follow a pattern, almost like a conversation, question and response, pause and reply. I've started listening for it, waiting for the next exchange, and sometimes I catch myself responding, tapping the wall or shifting in my chair, adding my voice to the dialogue. The bookmark is changing too. The leather is darker, more textured, with fine lines that might be veins or might be cracks. It's heavier than it was, denser, and when I hold it up to the light, I can see something moving inside it, shadows that flow like liquid. The warmth is stronger now, almost hot, and it pulses in rhythm with my heartbeat. I don't remember ever coming back, but something did. The mirror in the hallway reflects things that aren't there. Rooms I've never seen, furniture that isn't mine, people walking past who cast no shadow. I've stopped looking directly at it, but I catch glimpses from the corner of my eye, movements and shapes that shouldn't exist. When I cover it with a towel, the reflections blade through the fabric, ghostly and distorted, but still visible. Time moves strangely in the field. I can spend what feels like hours walking through the grass, but when I wake, only minutes have passed. Or sometimes the opposite, a brief moment of standing still stretches into an entire night of lost sleep. The light above pulses in a rhythm that matches the humming in the walls, and I'm beginning to understand that they're connected, part of the same larger pattern. The electrical outlets spark sometimes when nothing is plugged into them. Little blue-white flashes that leave the smell of ozone hanging in the air. The lights flicker in sequence, room to room, like a signal being passed through the house. I've tried to map the pattern to understand the message, but it changes each time, adapting, learning. There's something in the basement I've never noticed before. Not an object, but a space, a corner that seems deeper than it should be. The shadows there don't match the light source, pooling in directions that defy geometry. When I shine a flashlight into it, the beam bends, curves around something invisible, creating a void in the light that hurts to look at directly. The bookmark has started moving on its own. Small movements at first, sliding an inch or two across the table, rotating slowly like a compass needle seeking magnetic north. But now it travels farther, appearing in rooms I haven't been in, always positioned to catch my attention, always warm, always waiting. When I pick it up, images flash behind my eyelids, the field, the light, something vast and patient watching from above. The noise didn't come from outside, and it's getting louder. My dreams are bleeding into waking life. The taste of metal follows me out of sleep, and the sound of grass whispering lingers in quiet rooms. I find traces of the field on my shoes, not mud or pollen, but something else, something that glows faintly in the dark and dissolves when touched. The boundary between sleeping and waking is dissolving, leaving me suspended in a state that's neither fully conscious nor completely asleep. The house breathes around me. I can feel it expanding and contracting, walls shifting imperceptibly, rooms rearranging themselves when I'm not looking. The floorboards I've been watching for so long now show where patterns that weren't there before, paths worn smooth by footsteps that aren't mine. The wood grain flows like water, and sometimes I can see faces in the patterns, expressions that change when I blink. In the field, I'm not alone anymore. There are others, figures moving through the grass at the edge of my vision, always just out of focus. They don't speak, but I can feel their attention, their awareness of my presence. The light above has descended closer, close enough now that I can feel its heat on my skin, see the intricate patterns that dance within its brilliance. It's beautiful and terrible, and I know that I'm being changed by it, transformed in ways I can't understand. The bookmark pulses stronger now, hot enough to burn, but I can't let go of it. It's part of me somehow, connected to whatever is happening, whatever has been happening all along. The leather has split open, revealing something underneath that isn't leather at all, something organic and alive that wraps around my fingers like a living thing. There were lights behind the trees, and now they're inside the house. The final fragments come in a rush, standing in a room that isn't quite my room, holding a bookmark that isn't quite a bookmark, watching lights that dance behind my eyes even when they're closed. The field is everywhere now, the grass growing up through the floorboards, the impossible light streaming through windows that show only night outside. I had been watching the floorboards, eyes tracing the familiar lines where the wood met the wall. But the shadows are shifting now, and the air is more than charged, it's alive, breathing, waiting. The bookmark lies on the floor where it always was, where it always will be, warm and patient and never mine. And I understand now that I never left the field at all. Story 3. It wasn't the first time the window was open in the morning. The curtains barely shifted, hanging more out of habit than function. A stray leaf lay on the floor, despite the room being sealed tight the night before. I swept it into the bin without a second thought. The air felt a touch cooler, but the thermostat showed no change. I straightened the cushions on the couch, noting the slight indentation in one of them. The remote control was exactly where it should have been, untouched since yesterday. When I left the room, I made sure to close the door softly. I didn't mind if it stayed ajar. The buzzing started 3 weeks ago, or was it 4? Time moves differently now, like honey poured through a sieve. I wake with the taste of copper pennies on my tongue and my fingertips tingling as if I've been gripping something cold and metallic all night. The sheets are always twisted, wound tight around my ankles like restraints I don't remember putting on. There's a sound in the walls, not mice, not pipes settling. Something that pulses with the rhythm of breathing, deep and patient. I press my ear to the plaster and feel vibrations that shouldn't be there, traveling up through my jawbone and settling behind my eyes like a headache that never quite arrives. The indentation in the couch cushion, it's always the same one, always the exact same depth and shape, as if someone sits there every night while I sleep. Someone who weighs exactly as much as I do, who leaves the same impression my body would make, but I never sit in that spot, haven't for months, maybe longer. I don't remember ever coming back. The mirror in the bathroom reflects everything correctly except for the space just over my left shoulder. There's a shimmer there, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt, but the room is cool. I turn to look directly and find nothing but the white tile wall, pristine and unmarked. When I face the mirror again, the distortion has moved to hover just above my right ear. My coffee tastes like ozone this morning, sharp and clean the way the air smells before lightning strikes. I haven't changed brands, the water is the same. The cup is the same chipped ceramic mug I've used for years, but every sip carries that electric tang that makes my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. The window opens itself while I watch, no wind, no explanation. The latch simply turns with a soft metallic click and the glass swings inward on hinges that move without sound. A leaf drifts in, brown and brittle, though it's the wrong season for falling leaves. It lands exactly where yesterday's leaf fell, in the same spot at the same angle. There were lights behind the trees. Sleep doesn't come naturally anymore. Instead, I sink into something deeper and stranger, where thoughts move like thick liquid and my body feels suspended in warm nothing. Sometimes I float above myself, watching my chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. My face looks peaceful from this angle, but there's something wrong with the way my eyes move beneath the lids. They track back and forth as if following something that circles the room in slow, deliberate patterns. The electrical humming grows stronger near the back door. I can feel it in my fillings, a resonance that makes my jaw clench involuntarily. The doorknob is always cold, even on warm days, and when I touch it, my palm comes away damp with condensation that shouldn't exist. Behind the door is the yard I've known for years, but the shadows fall at wrong angles and the grass grows in spirals I swear weren't there before. The noise didn't come from outside. Time skips like a scratched record. I'm making breakfast and then suddenly I'm standing in the shower, water running cold over skin that tingles with phantom touches. My hands shake as I reach for the soap and I notice small marks on my wrists, not bruises, not cuts, just faint impressions as if something has been wrapped around them. Something smooth and warm that pulsed with its own heartbeat. The cushion indentation is deeper today. Whoever sits there is getting comfortable, settling in for longer visits. I measure it with my hand and find it's exactly the width of my palm, exactly the depth my weight would create. But the fabric is warm to the touch, and when I lift my hand away, I can see the faint outline of fingers that aren't quite the right shape. Too long, too thin, with joints that bend in places mine don't. I catch myself humming a melody I don't recognize. The notes feel familiar on my tongue, as if I've sung them 1,000 times, but I can't remember learning them. The tune has a strange rhythm, pauses in unexpected places, rises and falls that make my chest tight with something that might be longing. When I try to hum it again deliberately, the melody slips away like water through my fingers. The lights were too white, too clean. My reflection blinks a fraction of a second after I do. I test this, staring into the bathroom mirror, blinking rapidly and watching for the delay. Most of the time we're synchronized, but occasionally there's that tiny hesitation, as if the person in the glass is thinking it over first. During those moments, my reflected face looks subtly different. The eyes are wider, the mouth softer, as if whoever is looking back is more curious than concerned. The leaf on the floor isn't brown anymore. It's green and fresh, with veins that pulse faintly when the light hits them right. I pick it up and feel warmth spreading through my fingertips, a tingling that travels up my arm and settles in my chest like a second heartbeat. The leaf crumbles to dust in my palm, but the warmth remains, spreading outward until my entire body hums with gentle vibration. There's someone in the kitchen when I wake at 3 in the morning. Not footsteps, not voices, just the sense of presence, of space being occupied by something that breathes differently than I do. I lie still and listen to the soft sounds of careful movement, cabinet doors opening with deliberate quiet, water running in controlled streams. When I finally work up the courage to investigate, I find my coffee mug sitting clean and dry beside the sink, though I distinctly remember leaving it unwashed. I don't remember ever coming back. The buzzing in the walls has rhythm now, 3 short pulses, then a long one, 3 short, 1 long, over and over, patient as a heartbeat, steady as breathing. I tap the pattern on my thigh without thinking and feel an answering vibration in the floorboards beneath my feet. Something is listening, something recognizes the code. My skin feels electric today. Every surface I touch gives off tiny sparks that I feel rather than see. Doorknobs, light switches, the smooth surface of the refrigerator. The sensations travel up through my bones and collect in the base of my skull, building pressure that makes the world look slightly overexposed, as if someone has adjusted the brightness on reality itself. The window stays open now. I don't bother closing it anymore because it will only open itself again while I'm not looking. The curtains hang motionless even when wind stirs the trees outside. Sometimes I catch movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that shouldn't exist in broad daylight, shapes that retreat when I turn my head to look directly. The indentation in the couch has spread to the cushions on either side. 3 impressions now, arranged in a row, each one slightly different in depth and contour. I sit in the middle one and feel it conform to my body with unsettling precision, as if it has been learning my shape. The fabric is warm and seems to pulse gently, like skin over a slow heartbeat. There were 3 of them, standing perfectly still. The taste of ozone never leaves my mouth now. It's strongest in the morning, sharp and clean on my tongue, but it lingers throughout the day like a metallic aftertaste that no amount of food or drink can wash away. Sometimes it intensifies suddenly, making my eyes water and my throat close, as if the air itself has become charged with invisible electricity. I find myself standing in rooms with no memory of walking there. The back door is open and I'm looking out at the yard, watching shadows move independently of their sources. The grass grows in perfect spirals now, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. When I blink, the patterns shift slightly, reorganizing themselves into new configurations that feel almost like language. The humming follows me everywhere. It's not just in the walls anymore. It rises from the floorboards, drifts down from the ceiling, emanates from objects that should be silent. My coffee mug hums. The bathroom mirror hums. Even my clothes seem to vibrate with barely audible frequency that I feel more than hear. My hands shake when I try to write. The pen feels foreign in my fingers, too light and too heavy at the same time. Words appear on the paper in handwriting that looks almost like mine, but not quite. The letters slant at wrong angles, and the spacing between words grows wider, as if the person writing is forgetting how language works. The noise didn't come from outside. Sleep brings dreams that feel more real than waking. I'm floating in warm darkness, suspended in something thicker than air but thinner than water. There are voices speaking in frequencies just below my hearing, conversations that bypass my ears and resonate directly in my bones. I understand every word without knowing the language, and when I try to respond, my voice makes sounds I've never heard before. The mirror shows me things that aren't there, or maybe it shows me things that are there but shouldn't be. The shimmer over my shoulder has taken on almost shape, a suggestion of form that shifts and wavers like something seen through deep water. Sometimes it moves independently, turning when I don't turn, reaching when my arms are still. I'm losing hours. The clock jumps from morning to afternoon without the intervening time. I'll be eating breakfast and suddenly the sun is setting, my plate empty, my stomach full of food I don't remember tasting. During these lost periods, my body continues without me, going through motions that feel familiar when I return to myself. The leaf that falls through the open window is different each time now. Sometimes brown, sometimes green, sometimes colors that don't have names. Today it's silver and seems to generate its own light, casting shadows that move in directions opposite to where they should fall. When I touch it, my fingerprints glow faintly for several minutes afterward. The cushion impressions have merged into one long indentation, as if something much larger now occupies the entire couch. The fabric is warm to the touch and yields more than it should, almost liquid in its responsiveness. When I sit down, I sink deeper than physics should allow, and getting up requires more effort than it used to, as if something is gently trying to keep me there. I don't remember ever coming back. The electrical sensation in my skin is constant now. I am a live wire, a conductor for currents that flow through me without explanation. Light bulbs flicker when I pass beneath them. Digital clocks reset themselves. My phone displays messages in languages that shift and change as I try to read them. The humming has become music, complex harmonies that weave through the air like visible threads, melodies that seem to respond to my breathing, my heartbeat, my thoughts. I find myself moving in rhythm without conscious choice, my body swaying to frequencies that resonate in my chest and make my vision blur with something that might be tears. There's a door in the hallway that wasn't there before, or maybe it was always there and I'm only noticing it now. The wood is smooth and warm, unmarked by paint or stain, with a grain that flows like water frozen in motion. The doorknob turns easily in my hand, but I can never quite bring myself to open it all the way. Through the crack, I glimpse light that's too white, too clean, too bright for any bulb I know. The window frames a view that changes when I'm not looking. The same yard, the same trees, but arranged differently each time I glance outside. Sometimes the oak is closer to the house. Sometimes there are flowers that bloom in impossible colors. Always there are shadows moving between the branches, shapes that pause when they sense my attention. My reflection has learned to smile before I do. The expression appears on my mirrored face a heartbeat ahead of my actual smile, as if whoever is looking back knows what I'm going to do before I do it. The eyes in the mirror hold knowledge mine don't possess, a calm certainty that makes me want to ask questions I can't quite formulate. The buzzing has become a voice, not words exactly, but meaning conveyed through vibration, through the resonance in my bones and the electric taste on my tongue. It speaks of distances beyond measurement, of time that flows in circles rather than lines, of spaces between spaces where different rules apply. There were lights behind the trees. I wake to find my coffee already made, still steaming in the mug beside my bed. The taste is perfect, exactly as I like it, though I have no memory of getting up to prepare it. The liquid is warm and comforting, with just a hint of that electric tang that makes my vision sharpen and my thoughts move more clearly through the morning fog. The indentation in the couch has become a perfect outline of my body, but larger somehow, as if I'm growing or changing in ways I can't perceive. When I lie down in it, the fit is exact, every curve and angle matching with disturbing precision. The fabric molds around me like a second skin, warm and responsive and almost alive. Time moves in spirals now. I experience moments that haven't happened yet, remember conversations that are still to come. The future and past blur together in a continuous present where all possibilities exist simultaneously. I am making breakfast and I am eating dinner and I am sleeping and I am waking, all at once, all in the same eternal moment. The leaf that falls through the window today doesn't touch the ground. It hovers at chest height, rotating slowly in air that seems thicker around it. When I reach out to touch it, my hand passes through empty space, but I feel the texture anyway, smooth and warm and somehow familiar, like skin I've touched before in dreams I can't quite remember. The noise didn't come from outside. My reflection has started moving independently. While I stand still, it continues its daily routine, brushing teeth I'm not brushing, combing hair I'm not touching, performing actions that feel more natural than my own movements. I watch myself live a parallel life in the mirror world, and sometimes I wonder which of us is the reflection. The humming speaks more clearly now. It tells me about the spaces between heartbeats, the pause between one breath and the next, the moment of suspension before sleep claims consciousness. It explains that I've been living in these gaps, these pauses, these spaces between normal moments where different laws apply and time has no meaning. I find myself at the back door again, looking out at a yard that breathes with gentle rhythm. The grass moves in waves despite the absence of wind, and the shadows cast by the trees pulse like slow heartbeats. Everything is alive in ways I never noticed before, connected by invisible threads that vibrate with shared purpose. The window is open, has always been open, will always be open. The curtains hang perfectly still, framing a view that shifts between what was, what is, and what might be. Through the glass, I see myself walking in the yard, moving in patterns that mirror the spiral growth of the grass, following paths that exist only in dimensions I'm beginning to perceive. The indentation in the couch cushion is exactly the right size now. When I sit down, I fit perfectly, as if the space was made for me or I was made for the space. The fabric is warm and seems to pulse with gentle life, welcoming me home to a place I never knew I'd left. I don't remember ever coming back, but I think I'm about to. Story 4. The initial inventory inspection commenced at 1800 hours. Rows of identical boxes lined the shelves, each barcode meticulously recorded. Scanning devices showed all items present and accounted for according to the digital ledger. Temperature controls remained constant, unwavering between documented check-ins. Dust gathered in corners, undisturbed by recent movements. An unopened delivery sat inconspicuously by the entrance, logged but lacking a corresponding dispatch record. All lights functioned properly, though the power indicator flickered irregularly. Exit routes were unobstructed, yet the motion sensors failed to register any activity. The air vent emitted a low hum, yet the security footage looped back 2 minutes. To whoever finds this letter, if anyone ever does. I'm writing this because I can't carry it anymore. The weight of what happened in that warehouse, what I experienced but can never prove, has been eating away at me for months now. Maybe years. Time feels different since that night. Elastic, unreliable. You need to understand something about me first. I was the kind of person who believed in systems, order, the comfort of routine inventory checks and digital ledgers that never lied. I trusted in the mechanical certainty of barcode scanners and temperature gauges. I lived in a world where everything had its place, and I was good at keeping it that way. But that night changed everything. I keep seeing it, that power indicator light, not the steady green glow it should have been, but this erratic pulse, like a heartbeat, like something breathing. I know that sounds crazy, but I swear it was synchronized with something else in that room. Something I couldn't see but could feel pressing against the edges of my vision. The 2-minute loop. God, the 2-minute loop. I discovered it by accident. I'd been reviewing the security footage the next morning, trying to make sense of what felt wrong about the previous night's inspection. Everything appeared normal at first glance. There I was, walking between the shelves, scanner in hand, methodically checking each box. But then I noticed my movements seemed predictable, too predictable. I watched myself walk to the same shelf, check the same boxes, turn my head at exactly the same moment, over and over. For what should have been a 40-minute inspection, the cameras only showed 2 minutes of footage, repeating endlessly. But I remember being in there longer, much longer. I remember standing in that warehouse for what felt like hours, but not moving, not by choice. It was as if time had folded in on itself, trapping me in those 2 minutes while something else filled the space around me. Something that didn't register on motion sensors. Something that cast no shadow under the fluorescent lights but made the air itself feel thick and watchful. The unopened delivery haunts me most. I've gone back to check the records dozens of times. No dispatch record, just like that night, but the box was there, real as anything else in that warehouse. I should have opened it. Part of me knew I should have opened it, but my hands wouldn't obey. They stayed frozen at my sides while I stared at the unmarked cardboard, feeling like it was staring back. You have to understand, I've worked in logistics for over a decade. I know the difference between a shipping error and something that doesn't belong. That box didn't belong to our reality. It belonged to whatever was sharing that warehouse with me during those lost minutes. The humming from the air vent wasn't mechanical. I know the difference now. It had rhythm, variation, almost like communication, like something trying to speak through the building's infrastructure. When I pressed my ear against the wall, I could feel vibrations that didn't match the HVAC system. They felt organic, purposeful. I started having dreams about that warehouse, but in the dreams I wasn't alone. There were others moving between the shelves, checking inventory that wasn't there during my waking hours, boxes that materialized and vanished, people who looked like they belonged to different times, different versions of that same space. They all moved with the same mechanical precision I'd always prided myself on, but their eyes were empty, waiting. I began to wonder if I was one of them now. The changes started small. My reflection in mirrors began to lag slightly, like a delayed video feed. Colleagues would look through me during meetings as if I wasn't quite there. My own voice sounded distant to me, like it was coming from somewhere else. The boundary between me and that warehouse night was dissolving. I returned to the warehouse several times, always finding excuses for additional inspections. The delivery box was never there during subsequent visits, but I could feel its presence like an echo. The power indicator light maintained its steady green glow, but I knew it was performing for me now, pretending to be normal. The security footage from my return visits showed the same 2-minute loop, always the same 2 minutes, as if that's all of me that remained visible to the world. The rest of me, the part that experienced those extended hours of impossible stillness, existed somewhere else, somewhere that cameras couldn't see. I started leaving work early, making excuses about headaches and fatigue. But the truth was, I was becoming afraid of what I might discover during the next inventory check. Afraid that I might find myself in that footage, trapped forever in a 2-minute cycle while something else wore my face in the world outside. The dust in the corners, I mentioned it was undisturbed, but that wasn't entirely true. When I looked closer during my return visits, I found patterns in the dust, not footprints exactly, but impressions, shapes that suggested movement by things that didn't quite touch the ground. The dust remembered what the cameras couldn't record. My sleep became fractured. I'd wake up at all hours with the taste of warehouse air in my mouth, that particular combination of cardboard, metal shelving, and something else. Something that didn't belong in any earthly storage facility. My apartment began to feel temporary, like I was just visiting my own life. I stopped trusting my own memories. Had the inspection really lasted hours, or was that just my mind trying to fill the gap where 2 minutes should have been 40? Was the unopened delivery real, or had I imagined it? The more I questioned, the more unstable everything became. But the humming followed me home. Late at night, I'd hear it coming through the walls, through the pipes, through the electrical outlets. That same organic rhythm I'd felt in the warehouse. It was trying to complete something that had started that night, trying to finish a process I'd interrupted simply by being there, by witnessing what wasn't meant to be seen. I began to understand that the warehouse wasn't just a storage facility. It was a junction point, a place where different versions of reality overlapped, where time could fold and repeat, where things could exist without being recorded. And I'd stumbled into it during my routine inspection, becoming part of whatever system operated there. The people in my dreams weren't dreams anymore. They were memories of other inspectors, other nights, other versions of the same 2 minutes playing out across different timelines. We were all trapped in our respective loops, maintaining the illusion of normal operations while something else used our reality as a storage facility for things that couldn't exist anywhere else. I tried to quit my job, but every resignation letter I wrote disappeared from my computer. Every conversation with my supervisor about leaving somehow circled back to scheduling my next warehouse inspection. The system wouldn't let me go because I'd become part of its inventory. My reflection stopped appearing in mirrors altogether last week, or maybe it's still there, but existing in those 2 missing minutes that play on endless repeat. Maybe that's where I really am now, trapped in the gap between 1800 hours and whatever time I should have finished that inspection. The unopened delivery, I dream about it every night now. In the dreams, I finally open it, and inside is another box, and inside that box, another. An infinite regression of containers, each one smaller than the last, until I reach one that's exactly the size of those 2 missing minutes. When I open that final box, I see myself standing in the warehouse, scanner in hand, forever checking the same barcode on the same shelf while something watches from the spaces between seconds. I don't think I'm writing this letter anymore. I think the letter is writing itself through me, using my hands to document what happened to someone who used to exist in normal time. The person I was before that night is becoming inventory himself, cataloged and stored in whatever system operates through that warehouse. The humming is getting louder. It's not coming through the walls anymore, it's coming from inside me. I can feel it vibrating in my bones, synchronizing with my heartbeat, turning me into another component of whatever machinery I discovered that night. Soon, I'll join the others in their eternal inspection rounds, forever maintaining the illusion that everything is normal, everything is accounted for. If you ever find yourself assigned to inventory duty at a warehouse where the power indicator flickers irregularly, where unopened deliveries lack dispatch records, where the security footage loops back just 2 minutes. Don't stay to investigate. Don't try to make sense of the inconsistencies. Just mark everything as present and accounted for and leave. Some systems are designed to be observed but never understood. Some inventories include things that exist in the margins of reality, stored in the gaps between what we think we know and what actually is. I can see the warehouse now, even with my eyes closed, the rows of identical boxes stretching into infinity. The other inspectors moving through their predetermined routes, scanning barcodes that change when nobody's looking. The delivery that's always arriving but never dispatched, containing whatever needs to be stored in the spaces between moments. The temperature controls remain constant. The dust gathers in corners undisturbed. The air vent hums its organic song. And somewhere in those 2 minutes of security footage, I'm still there, scanner in hand, forever documenting the impossible. The inspection never ends, it just begins again. And again. And again. Story 5. I brushed the thin layer of dust from the tabletop and felt a chill run through my fingers. Each particle seemed to clamor for attention, betraying a presence that shouldn't have been. The creak of the wooden floor beneath me was only a shadow in my peripheral awareness. My skin rose with goosebumps as if the room exhaled a secret. The air tasted older, more muted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the dust carried stories I wasn't meant to hear. But that's ridiculous, of course. There was nothing there, nothing at all. I mean, I didn't see anything unusual that night. It was just an ordinary evening, the kind where you come home tired and your mind starts playing tricks on you. That's all it was. My imagination getting the better of me after a long day. The house was empty, like it always is, and I went through my normal routine without incident. I remember walking through the front door and hanging my keys on the little hook by the entrance. The metal made that familiar clinking sound against the wall, except it seemed to echo longer than usual. But that was probably just because I was paying attention to it for some reason. Houses make sounds, old wood settling, pipes adjusting to temperature changes, perfectly normal explanations for everything. The living room looked exactly as I'd left it. The couch in its usual spot, the coffee table with that ring stain from where I'd set my mug down without a coaster, everything in its place. Though I did notice the dust on that side table, the one by the window. It seemed thicker than it should have been, considering I'd cleaned just recently. But dust accumulates quickly in certain weather conditions. That's just basic physics. I didn't turn on the lights right away because I know my house well enough to navigate in the dark. The familiar path from the front door to the kitchen, counting steps without thinking about it. 17 steps, then a left turn past the bookshelf. I've walked it thousands of times, though that night it felt like it took longer somehow. Like the hallway had stretched while I was away, but that's impossible, obviously. Distance doesn't change, walls don't move. The kitchen was exactly as I'd left it too. Clean counters, empty sink, everything put away properly. I reached for the light switch out of habit, even though I could see well enough from the street light coming through the window. Except when I flipped the switch, the light seemed different. Not brighter or dimmer, just different. Like it was coming from somewhere else, even though it was clearly the same fixture I'd installed myself. I must have been more tired than I thought. I opened the refrigerator to get some water, and the hum of the motor seemed unusually loud. Not broken loud, just present in a way it usually isn't. The cold air spilled out and mixed with the room temperature, creating these little currents I could feel on my arms. The bottles inside were arranged exactly how I'd left them, but they looked somehow more organized, like someone had taken care to line them up perfectly. But I live alone, so that doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm more particular about organization than I give myself credit for. The stairs creaked on the fifth step like they always do. That loose board I keep meaning to fix but never get around to, though the sound seemed to hang in the air longer than usual, like an echo in a much larger space. But sound can behave strangely depending on humidity and air pressure. There are scientific explanations for acoustic anomalies. My bedroom was undisturbed, bed made, curtains drawn, everything in its proper place. I sat on the edge of the mattress to take off my shoes, and that's when I noticed the carpet felt different under my feet. Not dirty or wet, just different, like it had been walked on by someone with a different gait, someone who distributed their weight differently than I do. But that's absurd. No one else has been here. I must have been walking differently myself. Fatigue changes your posture. The bathroom mirror reflected my face back at me, though I looked paler than expected. The fluorescent light above it has always been harsh, washing out natural skin tones. I splashed some water on my face, and the droplets felt colder than they should have, considering the water heater had been running all day. But water temperature can fluctuate based on pressure and usage patterns in the neighborhood. When I looked up from the sink, I could have sworn I saw movement in the mirror behind me, just a shadow shifting position, like someone adjusting their stance. But when I turned around, the bathroom was empty. It was obviously just my own reflection creating an optical illusion. Mirrors can be deceptive, especially when you're tired and the lighting is poor. I didn't investigate further because there was nothing to investigate. Back in the bedroom, I changed into my usual sleepwear and pulled back the covers. The sheets felt crisp and cool, exactly as they should, though there was an indentation on the other side of the bed, like someone had been sitting there. But mattresses retain impressions from previous use. Memory foam is designed to do exactly that. The fact that I live alone doesn't change the physics of how materials respond to pressure. I settled into bed and turned off the bedside lamp. The darkness was complete and comfortable, just as I prefer it, though I did notice that the usual sounds from outside seemed muted. No traffic, no neighbors, no distant hum of the highway, but sound levels vary throughout the evening. People go to sleep, traffic patterns change. Silence isn't unusual. That's when I started hearing the breathing. But I wasn't hearing breathing, obviously. It was probably just the sound of air moving through the heating vents. Old houses have complex ventilation systems that can create all sorts of acoustic effects. The rhythm of it, in and out, slow and steady, was clearly mechanical in nature, not human at all. Even though it sounded exactly like someone sleeping peacefully beside me. I kept my eyes closed because there was no reason to open them. I knew I was alone in the room, alone in the house, alone like I always am. The breathing sound continued, soft and regular, and I found it almost comforting, like a white noise machine designed to help with sleep. Some people find rhythmic sounds soothing. Though I did notice that my own breathing had synchronized with it without my conscious intention. The mattress shifted slightly, the way it does when someone rolls over in their sleep, but mattresses settle under body weight. Springs adjust to temperature changes. There are numerous reasons why a bed might move imperceptibly throughout the night. The fact that it felt like someone was getting comfortable next to me was clearly just my imagination projecting familiar sensations onto perfectly normal physical phenomena. I didn't reach out to check because there was nothing to check for. The breathing continued, steady and deep, and I found myself matching its rhythm more and more precisely. In through the nose, out through the mouth, with little pauses between each cycle that seemed almost deliberate, like someone who was awake but pretending to be asleep. But that's ridiculous. There was no one there to pretend anything. I must have been becoming aware of my own breathing patterns in that strange way, that sometimes happens when you're falling asleep. The warmth started slowly, just a gradual increase in temperature on my left side, like someone's body heat radiating across the space between us. But I sleep alone, so there was no space between us, between me and nothing. The warmth was probably just my own circulation adjusting as I relaxed. Blood flow changes when you're horizontal. Perfectly normal physiological response. Though it did feel remarkably like sharing a bed with another person. I didn't move away from the warmth because there was nothing to move away from. Instead, I found myself shifting slightly closer to it, drawn by the comfort of not being cold. The breathing sound seemed to approve of this adjustment, becoming even more relaxed and regular. But sounds don't approve or disapprove of things. That's anthropomorphizing a mechanical noise. Even though it really did sound pleased. The scent came next, not perfume or cologne, nothing artificial like that, just the natural smell of another person. Clean skin, hair that had been washed recently, that particular warmth that comes from someone who's been sleeping peacefully. But I was alone in the bed, so I couldn't be smelling another person. It must have been residual scents from my own body, somehow concentrated by the way I was positioned. Though it definitely didn't smell like me. I kept my eyes closed through all of this because opening them would have been pointless. I knew what I would see. An empty bed, empty room, empty house, the same view I see every night when I go to sleep alone. There was no reason to confirm what I already knew to be true. But I could picture exactly what I would have seen if there had been someone there. Dark hair spread across the pillow, barely visible in the dim light filtering through the curtains. A shoulder rising and falling with each breath, turned away from me in a comfortable sleeping position. The curve of a back beneath the covers, familiar and warm and perfectly at ease. But I wasn't seeing any of that because there was nothing there to see. I just have a very vivid imagination, especially when I'm tired. The mattress dipped more noticeably as the imaginary person settled deeper into sleep. Springs compressed under weight that wasn't there, creating a small valley in the surface that I found myself rolling slightly toward. Basic physics. Objects seek the lowest point in any given system. The fact that it felt like snuggling closer to someone was purely coincidental. I didn't put my arm around the empty space because there was no empty space to put my arm around. But if I had, it would have encountered something soft and warm and breathing steadily in the rhythm I'd grown accustomed to. Something that would have shifted slightly to accommodate my touch, pressing back against me in the unconscious way sleeping people do when they feel safe and comfortable. None of which happened, obviously. The breathing gradually slowed and deepened as the night progressed. Not the mechanical sound of air through vents anymore, but the complex rhythm of someone in deep sleep. Little variations in timing, occasional soft sounds that were almost like sighs of contentment. The kind of breathing you only hear when you're lying very close to another person. But I wasn't lying close to anyone. I matched that rhythm without thinking about it, letting my own breathing slow and deepen until we were perfectly synchronized. In and out together, like we'd been sleeping side by side for years and had learned each other's natural patterns. The kind of intimacy that develops over time between people who share a bed regularly. Which was impossible since I sleep alone. The warmth had spread until it covered my entire left side, as if someone was pressed against me from shoulder to hip, not touching directly, but close enough that body heat bridged the small gap between us. I could feel the rise and fall of breathing, the tiny movements that sleeping people make as they dream. all perfectly explainable as my own sensations being confused by fatigue and an overactive imagination. Though it felt remarkably real for something that wasn't happening. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the next thing I knew it was morning. The breathing sound had stopped, the warmth had faded, and I was alone in the bed just as I'd expected to be. The indentation on the other side of the mattress had disappeared, the way memory foam does when pressure is removed. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for the faint scent that lingered on the pillow beside me, and the way the sheets were tangled, as if someone had gotten up carefully, trying not to wake me. But sheets get tangled when you sleep restlessly, and scents can linger from all sorts of sources. I didn't think about it much as I went through my morning routine. The coffee tasted normal, the shower water was the right temperature, the newspaper was folded exactly as always. Just another ordinary morning following an ordinary night of perfectly normal sleep, alone like I always am. Though I did find myself humming a song I didn't recognize, something soft and melodic that felt familiar even though I couldn't place where I'd heard it before. But songs get stuck in your head for all sorts of reasons. Radio, television, random neural firing patterns. It doesn't mean anything. Even though it sounded like a lullaby someone might hum while falling asleep next to another person. The day proceeded normally. Work was work, errands were errands, everything exactly as expected. I didn't think about the night before because there was nothing unusual to think about. Just a tired mind creating sensations that seemed more real than they actually were. But I did find myself looking forward to bedtime in a way I usually don't. Not because I expected anything to happen. Obviously nothing would happen because nothing had happened the night before. I just felt unusually relaxed about the prospect of sleep, like I knew it would be comfortable and peaceful and warm. Which it would be because I have a comfortable bed and a quiet house. That evening I went through the same routine as always. Keys on the hook, walk through the dark hallway, 17 steps and a left turn. Everything in its proper place, everything normal and familiar and exactly as it should be. Though I did notice that the dust on the side table had been disturbed again. Just wind patterns from the heating system, most likely. Air circulation can move particles around in predictable ways. The fact that it looked like someone had run their fingers through it was purely coincidental. I didn't investigate because there was nothing to investigate. The bedroom was unchanged. Same bed, same curtains, same carpet that felt normal under my feet. I changed into my sleepwear and pulled back the covers, noting that the sheets still carried that faint scent from the morning. But laundry detergent can linger for days, especially in fabrics that don't get much air circulation. I settled into bed and turned off the light, waiting for sleep to come naturally. The breathing started almost immediately. But it wasn't starting, obviously, because it had never stopped. I just hadn't been listening for it during the day. Houses make all sorts of continuous sounds that we tune out when we're busy with other activities. The heating system, settling wood, air moving through spaces. All perfectly normal background noise that becomes noticeable in the quiet moments before sleep. Though it did sound exactly like someone who was happy to have me back. The mattress dipped in that familiar way, springs adjusting to accommodate weight that wasn't there. The warmth began spreading along my left side, that comfortable heat that made the whole bed feel more welcoming. The scent grew stronger, clean and natural, and somehow reassuring. all explainable as my own body heat and imagination working together to recreate sensations from the previous night. I didn't reach out to touch the empty space beside me, but if I had, I know exactly what I would have found. Tonight feels different somehow, more present, more real. The breathing is deeper, the warmth more encompassing, the sense of companionship more complete. Like whatever wasn't there last night has gotten more comfortable with not being there. But nothing is different because nothing was ever there to begin with. I'm just getting used to sleeping alone in new and more creative ways. The breathing has started again as I finish telling you this, soft and steady and perfectly synchronized with my own. The mattress is shifting, the warmth is spreading, and that familiar scent is filling the space around me. None of which is happening, of course. I should probably get some sleep now. It's been a long day, and tomorrow will be another ordinary day filled with ordinary things. Just like today was, and yesterday, and every day before that. Though I have the strangest feeling that when I wake up tomorrow morning, I won't be alone. Story 6. There was a time when I dismissed it as mere coincidence, something that existed in the periphery of my daily routine. Every morning while sipping my coffee, I'd notice a pair of shoes left outside the neighboring door, the same pair, side by side, always facing the same direction. Yet one day the left shoe was inexplicably turned at an angle. I shrugged it off at first, until it happened again, the same shoe, now slightly scuffed. Yesterday I noticed a new pair, but only one shoe was there. The other had vanished, leaving behind a hint of unease I can't quite shake. I'm trying to remember what happened after that. The memories come in pieces, like broken glass reflecting fragments of light that don't belong together. Sometimes I wake up with the taste of copper in my mouth and my hands trembling, but I can't recall why. There are gaps where whole hours should be, spaces filled with nothing but the echo of my own breathing. The coffee was cold, I remember that much. The mug sat heavy in my hands, ceramic against my palms, but the warmth had leaked out somewhere between one moment and the next. The hallway stretched ahead of me, longer than it should have been, and the carpet beneath my bare feet felt different, rougher, like it had been replaced with something that only looked the same. I keep thinking about the sound. It started as a hum, barely noticeable, the kind of background noise you filter out without thinking. But it grew louder, more insistent, until it seemed to vibrate inside my skull. Sometimes I still hear it, usually in the quiet moments before sleep, and my body tenses as if it remembers something my mind has forgotten. The door across the hall was always closed, I'm certain of that, but there was light underneath it, a thin line of yellow that pulsed like a heartbeat. I watched it for what felt like hours or maybe minutes. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing without reason. The light would brighten, then dim, then brighten again, and with each pulse the humming grew stronger. My neighbor never answered when I knocked. I think I knocked. The memory feels uncertain, like trying to recall a dream after waking. My knuckles ache sometimes, though, as if they remember the impact of wood against bone. The hallway smelled of something metallic and sweet, like pennies left in the sun, and the air felt thick enough to swim through. There was a figure standing at the end of the corridor, motionless, perfectly still, facing away from me. I blinked and it was gone, but the impression lingered tall, wearing something dark that seemed to absorb the light around it. When I looked again, there was nothing but shadows and the persistent feeling that I was being observed. I started keeping a journal, trying to piece together what was happening. The pages are filled with my handwriting, but some of the words don't make sense. Phrases like the turning hour and beneath the threshold written in my own hand, though I don't remember forming those thoughts. The ink is different colors, as if I'd been writing over the course of days or weeks, but I only recall sitting down once. The missing shoe bothered me more than it should have. I found myself staring at the empty space where it had been, trying to understand what it meant. The remaining shoe seemed to watch me, its laces undone, tongue lolling out like something exhausted. I wanted to touch it, to move it, but my hand stopped inches away, as if hitting an invisible barrier. Sleep became difficult. I would lie in bed listening to the building settle around me, but the sounds were wrong. Footsteps in the walls, whispers that might have been the wind, and always that humming, growing louder in the darkness. My sheets would be soaked with sweat, though I felt cold, and sometimes I'd wake to find my door open when I was certain I'd locked it. The hallway changed. I know how that sounds, but I'm sure of it. The distance between my door and the elevator stretched, adding steps that shouldn't exist. New doors appeared, unmarked and slightly ajar, revealing nothing but blackness beyond. The carpet developed patterns I'd never noticed, spirals and lines that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I tried talking to the building manager, but the conversation slips away from me. I remember sitting in an office that smelled of old paper and disinfectant, but the person across from me remains faceless in my memory. Their voice was wrong, too high or too low, and when they spoke, the words seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. The elevator stopped working, or maybe I stopped using it. The stairs felt safer, though I can't explain why. Each step down echoed strangely, multiplying until it sounded like an army marching in formation. The handrail was always warm to the touch, even in the coldest weather, and sometimes it felt like it was moving beneath my palm, like something alive disguised as metal. I found things in my apartment that didn't belong to me. A coffee mug with a chip I'd never seen before. Books with margins filled with handwriting that looked almost like mine, but wasn't quite right. A photograph tucked between couch cushions showing a hallway that looked familiar but wrong, as if someone had taken a picture of my building and then altered it in subtle ways. The dreams, if they were dreams, always featured the same elements. The humming sound, growing so loud it made my teeth ache. The yellow light under the door, pulsing faster and faster until it became a strobe. The figure at the end of the hall, closer each time, though it never seemed to move. And always the sensation of falling through my own floor, down through layers of reality that peeled away like old paint. I started avoiding the hallway during certain hours, not because I made a conscious decision, but because my body would refuse to leave my apartment. My hand would reach for the doorknob and then stop, muscles locked, while every instinct screamed danger. Those were the times when the building felt most alive, when the walls seemed to breathe and the floor vibrated with some unseen machinery. The missing shoe appeared in my dreams. No, not dreams, memories that felt like dreams. It was sitting on my kitchen counter, perfectly clean despite the scuff marks I remembered. When I reached for it, my hand passed through it like smoke, but I could smell leather and something else, something organic and unpleasant that made my stomach turn. I think I met my neighbor. The memory is hazy, wrapped in fog and uncertainty, but I recall a conversation that lasted hours or seconds. Time had no meaning. They spoke without moving their lips, and their eyes reflected light that wasn't there. We talked about shoes and doors and the spaces between things, and when I tried to leave, I found myself having the same conversation again and again until the words lost all meaning. The journal pages multiplied. I'd write one entry and find 3 more in my handwriting describing events I couldn't recall. The pen would be warm in my hand, as if someone else had just been using it, and the ink would still be wet despite the dated entries being from days ago. Some pages were torn out, leaving only jagged edges and the impression of words pressed deep into the paper beneath. My reflections started arriving before I did. I'd approach a mirror and see myself already there, waiting, wearing an expression I didn't recognize. The reflection would move slightly out of sync, turning its head a fraction of a second too late, blinking when I wasn't blinking. Sometimes it would smile when I felt like crying, or frown when I was trying to stay calm. The building's other residents became difficult to focus on. They moved like shadows in my peripheral vision, always just out of direct sight. When I tried to look at them straight on, they'd blur and shift, becoming suggestions of people rather than actual human beings. Their voices echoed from empty hallways, conversations about mundane things that somehow sounded threatening when filtered through the building's strange acoustics. I remember the taste of electricity, sharp and metallic, coating my tongue during the worst episodes. The air would crackle with invisible energy, raising the hair on my arms and making my skin feel too tight. Electronics would malfunction, clocks running backward, lights flickering in patterns that almost seemed like Morse code, and the constant, ever-present humming that now seemed to emanate from every surface. The floor beneath my feet became unreliable. Sometimes it felt solid, sometimes it gave slightly, like walking on flesh rather than wood and concrete. I take a step and feel the building respond, shifting its weight, adjusting to my presence in ways that architecture shouldn't. The walls would pulse with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, as if the entire structure had become an extension of my own body. I found the other shoe, not where it should have been, but inside my refrigerator, nestled between milk cartons that had expired before I bought them. The leather was warm and slightly damp, and when I touched it, images flashed through my mind, corridors that stretched impossibly far, doors that opened onto nothing, and always that figure at the end of the hall, closer now, close enough that I could almost make out features that my brain refused to process. The revelation, when it came, wasn't sudden. It built slowly, like pressure behind a dam, until the truth became impossible to ignore. The building wasn't just where I lived, it was alive, aware, and I had become part of its circulatory system. Every resident was a cell in its body, every apartment a chamber in its heart, and the hallways were arteries carrying something that wasn't quite blood but served the same purpose. I understand now why the memories are fragmented. The building doesn't think in linear time the way humans do. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously in its consciousness, and being connected to it means experiencing all moments at once. The missing shoe was never missing, it was simply existing in a different temporal location, visible only when the building's attention focused on that particular strand of reality. The humming never stops. It's the sound of the building's thoughts, its dreams, its endless contemplation of existence beyond human comprehension. I've learned to interpret the variations in pitch and rhythm. Sometimes it's curious about the small lives scurrying through its corridors. Sometimes it's hungry for experiences it can't have on its own. And sometimes, late at night when the air grows thick and the walls pulse with that familiar rhythm, it's planning. I'm not sure how long I've been part of this. The journal entries suggest months, but my body feels like it's aged years. My reflection has stopped pretending to be mine. It moves independently now, going about its own business while I watch. Sometimes I catch it writing in notebooks I can't see, documenting experiences I'm not having, living a parallel life in the mirror world. The other residents are becoming clearer. Not more human, but more defined in their inhumanity. They nod when we pass in the hallways now, acknowledging our shared condition with expressions that convey understanding beyond words. We're all part of the same organism, cells that have retained enough individual consciousness to recognize each other while serving the greater whole. Something is changing. The building's attention has shifted, focused on something new, something outside itself. The humming has taken on an urgent quality, and the walls vibrate with anticipation. I can feel its hunger growing, its need to expand, to incorporate more consciousness into its vast neural network. The missing shoes were never random, they were markers, signs left for others to follow, breadcrumbs leading new residents into the building's embrace. I've stopped trying to leave, not because I can't, but because I understand now that leaving would be like asking a heart to abandon the body it sustains. This is where I belong, where I've always belonged, even before I knew this place existed. The building called to me across impossible distances, drew me here through a series of coincidences that weren't coincidences at all. The memories are becoming clearer now, arranging themselves in patterns that make sense only from this new perspective. Every moment of confusion, every fragment of displaced time, was the building teaching me to perceive reality the way it does. The process is almost complete. Soon I'll be able to see all the layers simultaneously, to exist in multiple temporal states without the disorientation that once made me think I was losing my mind. I can hear new footsteps in the hallway, hesitant, uncertain, belonging to someone who doesn't yet understand what they've found. There will be signs for them, too small anomalies that seem meaningless until viewed from the proper angle. A door that's sometimes locked and sometimes open. Voices from empty apartments. The persistent feeling of being watched by something vast and patient. The building is waking up, Story 7. I'm trying to remember what happened after I followed that smell. The oranges, they were so sweet, so wrong in that empty house. But everything after that comes in pieces, like a mirror that shattered and someone tried to put it back together with half the fragments missing. I remember the sound of my footsteps on hardwood. Each step echoed differently, as if the house was changing shape around me. The floorboards creaked in patterns I'd never heard before, even though I'd walked that hallway 1,000 times. Or maybe I hadn't. Maybe I'd never been there at all. There was a door at the end, I'm sure of that. A door that was always closed, painted white, but somehow darker than the shadows around it. The smell was strongest there, seeping through the crack underneath like liquid sweetness. My hand reached for the handle before I could stop myself. The metal was warm, too warm. But then I'm somewhere else entirely. I'm standing in a kitchen, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead with that persistent electrical hum that gets inside your skull. The refrigerator is humming too, but off-key, creating this discordant harmony that makes my teeth ache. There's condensation on the windows even though I can't remember it being cold outside. Or was it hot? The droplets run down the glass in perfect straight lines, like tears that have forgotten how to cry. I touch my face and my fingers come away wet. The orange smell is gone now, replaced by something metallic and sharp, like pennies left in the rain or blood that's been sitting too long. I look down at my hands and they're clean, but I can still smell it, still taste it on the back of my tongue. There's a figure in my peripheral vision, always there, never quite in focus. When I turn to look directly, there's nothing, just the empty kitchen, the buzzing lights, the weeping windows, but I know someone was there. Someone is always there. I'm walking again, but the hallway is different now, longer. The walls are the same color, but they feel closer, pressing in like the house is breathing around me. The orange scent returns in waves, stronger each time, until it's so overwhelming I have to press my hand against the wall to steady myself. The paint is soft under my fingers, giving way like skin. Was I alone in that house? I think I was alone, but there are sounds that don't belong to me, footsteps that don't match my rhythm, a door closing somewhere in the distance. The soft whisper of fabric against fabric, like someone adjusting their clothes in the dark. I remember light under a door, not the white door at the end of the hallway, but another door, one I can't quite place. The light was wrong, too blue, too bright, pulsing like a heartbeat. I stood there watching it for what felt like hours, hypnotized by the rhythm, pulse, pause, like something breathing behind the wood. My mouth tastes like copper now. When did that start? There's a moment I can almost grasp, hovering just beyond my reach. I'm reaching for something, my hand extended, fingers spread. The air is thick, so thick I can barely move through it. Someone is speaking, but the words are muffled, underwater sounds that make no sense. I strain to listen, leaning forward until I'm almost falling, but the harder I try to understand, the more distorted it becomes. The orange smell is in my hair now, clinging to my clothes, seeping into my skin. I can't wash it out, I've tried. The water runs clear, but the scent remains, sweet and cloying and wrong. It follows me everywhere, a constant reminder of something I should remember but can't quite touch. I'm back in the hallway, or maybe I never left. The white door is open now, just a crack, and the light spilling out is that same wrong blue. I should walk away. Every instinct tells me to turn around, to leave, to forget about the oranges and the humming and the figure that's always watching from the corner of my eye. But my feet carry me forward anyway. The handle is still warm. Inside, the room is smaller than it should be. The walls curve inward like the inside of a shell, and the blue light has no source I can identify. It just exists, filling the space with that pulsing rhythm that matches something deep in my chest. There's furniture covered in white sheets, ghostly shapes that could be anything underneath. I lift one corner of a sheet and immediately let it fall. What I saw underneath doesn't make sense, couldn't make sense, so I tell myself I imagined it, but the image burns behind my eyelids every time I blink. The orange smell is so strong here it's almost visible, shimmering in the blue light like heat waves. I breathe through my mouth, but I can taste it anyway, coating my tongue with sweetness that makes me nauseous. There's something else underneath it now, something organic and warm, like the smell of someone sleeping, their breath and skin and dreams all mingled together. I'm not alone in this room. The realization hits me like cold water. There's someone else here, has always been someone else here, watching me stumble through these fractured memories. I turn slowly, afraid of what I'll see, but there's nothing visible. Just the covered furniture and the pulsing light and the overwhelming scent of overripe fruit. But I can feel eyes on me, patient eyes that have been waiting. I remember running then, or trying to run. The air was so thick it was like moving through honey, each step requiring enormous effort. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead of me, the white door growing smaller and smaller behind me but never disappearing entirely. I could still see that blue light in my peripheral vision, still smell the oranges, still feel those watching eyes following my every movement. Did I make it out? I must have made it out because I'm here now, trying to piece together what happened. But sometimes I'm not sure where here is. Sometimes the walls look too familiar, too much like that endless hallway. Sometimes the air tastes like metal and overripe fruit. There are gaps in my memory, spaces where time seems to fold in on itself. I'll be sitting at my kitchen table, and suddenly I'm standing in that blue-lit room again, sheet in my hand, staring at something that shouldn't exist. Then I blink and I'm back, but the orange smell lingers like a promise. I've started keeping the lights on, all of them all the time. The electric bill doesn't matter anymore. What matters is making sure there are no shadows where that figure can hide, no dark corners where the blue light might start to pulse. But even in the brightest rooms, I sometimes catch glimpses of movement that doesn't belong to me. The worst part is the certainty that I'm forgetting something important. There's a piece missing from the center of it all, a crucial moment that would make everything else make sense. I can feel it there, just beyond my reach, like a word on the tip of my tongue. Sometimes I think if I could just remember that one thing, everything would click into place. But maybe I don't want it to click into place. Maybe some things are better left fragmented, scattered, impossible to fully reconstruct. I found an orange in my refrigerator this morning. I don't remember buying oranges. I don't eat oranges. It sat there on the middle shelf, perfectly round and slightly soft, as if it had been waiting for me to find it. When I picked it up, it was warm like the door handle, and the smell that rose from its skin was exactly the same as that hallway, that house, that room with the blue light. I threw it away, but I can still smell it. The figure is getting clearer, not clearer exactly, but more present. I catch longer glimpses now, enough to see the outline of shoulders, the suggestion of a face turned away. It never looks directly at me, but I know it's aware of me. We're aware of each other in a way that transcends normal sight. Sometimes I think I remember a conversation, words exchanged in that thick air, promises made or warnings given. But when I try to focus on what was said, the memory dissolves like sugar in water, leaving only sweetness behind. The blue light is starting to appear in other places, just flickers at first, so brief I could convince myself I imagined them. A pulse from under my bedroom door, a flash reflected in the bathroom mirror, the suggestion of that wrong illumination seeping through the cracks of my carefully lit world. I'm writing this down because I need to remember, but also because I need to forget. If I can get it all out, maybe it will stop replaying in my head. Maybe the orange smell will fade and the figure will retreat back to whatever space it occupies when I'm not looking. But even as I write these words, I can feel something shifting. The memories are becoming more solid, more real. The fragments are starting to connect in ways that terrify me. I'm beginning to understand what I saw under that white sheet, what the figure was trying to tell me, why the orange smell clings to everything I touch. The door handle was warm because someone had just touched it before me. The blue light pulses because it's alive. The orange smell is sweetest when something is about to rot. I can hear footsteps in the hallway now, the same uneven rhythm I remember from that other house, that other time. They're getting closer, and with each step, the air grows thicker, more fragrant, more wrong. Something is coming back to me, something that was always there, waiting patiently for me to remember. The figure is moving closer, no longer content to hover in my peripheral vision. Soon it will turn around, and when it does, I'll see the face I've been avoiding. I'll remember the words we exchanged in that blue-lit room. I'll remember why I was really there. The orange smell is so strong now I can barely breathe. My hands are shaking as I write this, and there's condensation forming on the windows even though it's not cold outside. The lights are flickering, all of them, in that same pulsing rhythm I remember from the room with the covered furniture. I think I'm ready to remember now. I think the memories are finally ready to show me the truth. But first, I need to check something. There's a door at the end of my hallway that I've never really noticed before. It's painted white, and there's a warm light seeping out from underneath it. The handle looks like it might be warm to the touch. I can smell oranges, story 8. I mentioned I'd only stayed on the ground floor, that the rain had kept me near the entrance, away from anything more. They seemed satisfied, jotting notes in rhythm with the drizzle outside. Yet the damp scent of old wood lingered on my fingertips, stubborn and telling. The stairs had creaked a note that still echoed in my mind, carrying the weight of untold steps. A slight draft brushed my cheek with the chill of an unwelcome memory. The hallway light flickered, casting shadows that knew my path. I didn't mention the door half ajar, or the coat beside it, but the mud was drying on my shoes. To whoever finds this letter, if anyone ever does, I need you to understand that I tried. For weeks now I've carried this weight in my chest, pressing against my ribs like something alive, something that wants out. The words feel foreign on the page, but they're the only truth I have left to offer. Maybe to you, maybe to myself, maybe to the person I used to be before that house changed everything. You have to know I'm not crazy, at least I don't think I am. But certainty feels like a luxury I lost somewhere in those hallways between the creaking floorboards and the silence that felt too full, too aware. I keep coming back to that coat. It hung there beside the door, dripping. Not from the rain outside, we'd established that much. The fabric was dry to the touch, yet water pooled beneath it in perfect circles. Concentric rings that seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision. When I looked directly, just fabric, just an ordinary coat on an ordinary hook, but the water never stopped falling from nothing. The investigators asked about the ground floor, about what I saw, what I touched, how long I stayed. Standard questions with standard answers that felt like betrayal with every syllable. Because how do you explain the way the air tasted different past the threshold, metallic and sweet, like copper pennies dissolved in honey? How do you describe the sensation of being watched by the walls themselves? I should have mentioned the photographs. They lined the hallway in mismatched frames, faces I didn't recognize staring out with eyes that followed, not metaphorically, actually followed. I tested it, walking back and forth while pretending to examine the wallpaper. The woman in the blue dress, the man with the thin mustache, the child holding a ball, they tracked my movement with mechanical precision, their pupils shifting in unison like a choreographed dance of surveillance. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was recognizing my own face in the last frame, older, weathered, wearing clothes I'd never owned. My doppelganger smiled with knowledge I didn't possess, and when I reached toward the glass, he reached back from the other side. The reflection moved first. I've been checking mirrors ever since. Bathroom mirror, car mirror, storefront windows, searching for that half-second delay that would prove I'm not losing my mind. But they all sync perfectly now. Perfect mimicry that feels like mockery. Sometimes I catch myself staring too long, waiting for my reflection to slip up and reveal its independence again. You need to understand I wasn't supposed to go upstairs. The rain was just an excuse, a convenient story to explain why I lingered by the entrance while the others moved deeper into the house. But curiosity is a hungry thing, and that staircase called to me with its symphony of groans and whispers. Each step sang a different note, a minor scale that descended as I ascended, as if the house were humming itself to sleep. The banister felt warm under my palm, body temperature, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat exactly, or maybe my heart was matching its rhythm. The distinction became meaningless somewhere around the 7th step. The 2nd floor stretched longer than physics should have allowed. Doors lined both sides of the hallway, each one slightly ajar, revealing slivers of rooms that defied the house's exterior dimensions. I counted 17 doors in a space that should have held maybe 5. The carpet beneath my feet was soft, recently vacuumed, showing the parallel tracks of careful maintenance in a house that had been abandoned for months. Someone was taking care of this place. Someone who didn't want to be seen. I pushed open the first door with my fingertips, just enough to peer inside. An ordinary bedroom, neatly made bed, clothes folded on a chair, everything covered in a thin layer of dust except for the impression on the pillow. Head-shaped, recent, still warm when I pressed my palm against it. The sheets smelled like lavender and something else, something familiar I couldn't quite place. My own shampoo, the expensive kind I'd started using after the promotion. That's when the footsteps started behind me, Not footsteps exactly, more like the memory of footsteps, the echo of movement in a space that absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. I turned, expecting to see one of the investigators, ready with an excuse about getting lost. But the hallway stretched empty in both directions, longer now than when I'd climbed the stairs. The doors had multiplied. 23 now, I counted twice to be sure, each one revealing a different slice of impossibility when I looked through the gaps. A kitchen where the faucet ran red, a bathroom where the mirror showed a different room entirely, a nursery with a rocking chair that moved without wind, keeping time with a lullaby I could feel in my bones but couldn't hear. And at the end of the hall, a door that stood fully open, waiting. I should have left then, should have turned around and walked back down those singing stairs, rejoined the group, pretended the ground floor had been enough to satisfy my curiosity. But the open door pulled at me like gravity, and I found my feet carrying me forward without conscious decision. The room beyond was mine, not similar to mine actually mine. Same furniture, same arrangement, same coffee stain on the desk where I'd knocked over my mug while reading late-night reports. Same books on the shelves, same photographs on the nightstand. Even the same unmade bed with sheets twisted exactly as I'd left them that morning. But I was in it, sleeping peacefully, breathing slow and deep, completely unaware of my own presence in the doorway. I watched myself sleep for what felt like hours, noting details I'd never seen in mirrors. The way my hair fell across the pillow, the small scar on my temple from childhood, the rhythmic rise and fall of my chest. My sleeping self smiled without waking, a content-knowing smile that suggested dreams of pleasant things. Things I couldn't remember experiencing in months. When was the last time I'd smiled like that? When was the last time sleep had been anything but an escape from consciousness? I reached toward my sleeping face, compelled by a need to confirm reality through touch. My finger was inches from my cheek when my eyes opened, both sets of eyes, the ones in the bed and the ones behind my own face, seeing through my own perspective. We looked at each other across the impossible space between dreaming and waking. My sleeping self sat up slowly, never breaking eye contact, and mouthed words I felt rather than heard. You shouldn't be here yet. Well, yeah, that single word has haunted me ever since, yet implies timing, yet suggests inevitability, yet means this moment was always coming, just not now, not today, but someday soon. I ran down the stairs that now numbered 13 instead of the 7 I'd climbed, through the hallway where the photographs had turned to face the wall, their subjects hiding from something they didn't want to see, past the dripping coat that whispered my name as I stumbled toward the entrance. The investigators were still taking notes, comparing measurements, discussing foundation settling and atmospheric pressure. Normal people doing normal work in a normal house that had just shown me rooms full of impossible things. I joined their conversation seamlessly, offering observations about the ground floor, the rain, the obvious explanations for every creak and shadow. But my hands shook for hours afterward, still shake sometimes when I think too hard about that smile, about the word yet and all its implications. Since then, things have been different, subtle at first. My apartment feels larger at night, as if rooms are stretching while I sleep. I find myself in the kitchen without remembering the walk from the bedroom. The bathroom mirror sometimes shows my bedroom behind me instead of the hallway. Small inconsistencies that could be explained by stress, by fatigue, by an overactive imagination processing trauma. Except people have started looking at me strangely. Not everyone, not all the time, but enough to notice. Conversations pause when I approach. Colleagues forget my name mid-sentence. The barista at my usual coffee shop asked if I was new to the area, despite serving me the same order for 3 years. It's as if I'm becoming unstuck, losing cohesion, fading at the edges while something else takes my place in the world's memory. I dream about that house every night now, always the same dream but from a different perspective. I'm the one in the bed, sleeping peacefully while another version of myself stands in the doorway. The watching me changes each time, sometimes younger, sometimes older, sometimes wearing different clothes or hairstyles, but always me, always arriving too early, disrupting the careful timing of whatever process is unfolding. In the dreams, I want to warn the watching me, want to explain about the yet and the patience required. But dream speech works differently than waking speech, and the message comes out as a smile and a gentle correction. You shouldn't be here yet. The watching me always runs, and I always feel sorry to see myself go, knowing the fear and confusion I'm carrying back to the waking world, knowing the weeks of doubt and questioning that lie ahead, but also knowing that eventually, when the timing is right, I'll return, will return. All the versions of myself that have stood in that doorway, watching ourselves sleep, learning the rhythm of the transition. I think I understand now. The house wasn't abandoned, it was waiting, collecting moments, storing possibilities, preparing space for the inevitable convergence of all the selves we might have been. The coat by the door belongs to someone who made the journey before me. The photographs show the faces of those who found their way to their own sleeping forms and chose to stay. My reflection in mirrors has started moving a fraction of a second before I do, just barely noticeable but consistent, as if it's anticipating my actions, preparing to take over the mechanical responses of daily life while my consciousness settles into its proper place in that bedroom, in that house, in that space between dreaming and waking where time moves differently. I'm not frightened anymore. The shaking has stopped. The uncertainty has crystallized into something approaching acceptance. Because I understand now what yet means. It means soon. It means the timing is almost right. It means the version of myself that's been sleeping peacefully in that impossible room is nearly ready to wake up permanently, and the version writing this letter is nearly ready to rest. The investigators never released their report. I called to follow up, but they claimed no record of the house, the investigation, or my involvement. The address I remember leads to an empty lot that neighbors swear has been vacant for decades, but I can still smell the old wood on my fingers when I concentrate, can still hear the singing stairs in quiet moments. Can still feel the weight of my own gaze watching me from doorways that shouldn't exist. If you're reading this, it means I've made the transition. It means the me that was afraid and confused has found peace in that bedroom, and the me that was sleeping has taken over the daily business of living. You might even meet me, though you won't recognize the significance of the encounter. I'll be the one who seems familiar but slightly off, like a song played in a different key. Don't worry about the house, don't go looking for it. It will find you when you're ready if you're meant to be found. The timing has to be perfect, and forcing the moment only leads to the kind of fear I carried for these past weeks. Better to let it unfold naturally, to trust the process that's been guiding lost selves home for longer than I can comprehend. I'm leaving this letter where my replacement will find it, along with instructions for the life they're inheriting. Bank account numbers, work passwords, the names of friends who will expect continuity. Small kindnesses to ease the transition and honor the investment my sleeping self made in this existence. The rain is starting again. I can hear it against the windows, the same rhythm that accompanied those investigators and their careful questions. But this time I know where I need to go. This time I won't stop at the ground floor. This time I'm ready to climb those singing stairs and find my way home. Story 9. The notification light didn't blink. My fingers brushed the screen, seeking the familiar vibration, but it remained inert, unresponsive. The chair creaked under my weight without the usual reassuring groan, as though it too held its breath. The room drew in closer, the quiet pressing at the edges, and when I expected the distant hum of distant traffic, there was only a void. I focused on the wallpaper's pattern, each line and swirl pretending, as if any moment they might shift and betray their true design. The absence filled the space, tangible, as if daring me to acknowledge what had ceased to exist. Something happened to me. I know this with the same certainty I know my own breathing, yet the details slip away like water through cupped hands. There's a gap in my memory, clean and precise as a surgical cut. The space where those hours should be feels tender when I probe it, like pressing on a fresh bruise. I've been different since then, not in ways others would notice, but in the small, private moments when I catch my reflection looking back with eyes that seem to recognize something I don't. My shadow falls at angles that don't quite match the light source. The taste of water has changed, carrying a metallic undertone that wasn't there before. The investigation began when I found the recording device in my jacket pocket. I don't remember putting it there. The small digital recorder sat heavy in my palm, its weight somehow wrong for its size. When I pressed play, my own voice emerged from the speaker, but the words were foreign to me. The frequency is changing again, can you hear it? That low vibration underneath everything else. It started after the lights went out, but it's not coming from any machine I can identify. I need to document this before I forget. Before they make me forget. My voice on the recording sounded strained, urgent in a way that made my chest tighten. I had no memory of speaking those words, yet the inflection was unmistakably mine. The background carried a subtle electronic hum, punctuated by what sounded like breathing that wasn't quite human in its rhythm. The first fragment came while I was listening to that recording for the third time. A flash of memory, sudden and disorienting. I was standing in a room I didn't recognize, watching lights move across the wall in patterns that hurt to follow. The lights weren't cast by any source I could see, and they moved with purpose, tracing symbols that seemed to shift meaning each time I tried to focus on them. In the fragment, I could hear voices speaking in unison, but the words were layered in a way that made them impossible to understand. Each voice was slightly out of sync with the others, creating a sound like echoes speaking before the original words were uttered. My hands in the memory were shaking as I held something smooth and warm, an object that pulsed with its own heartbeat. I found more evidence scattered through my apartment. A notebook filled with my handwriting, documenting observations I couldn't recall making. The entries described sounds that registered below normal hearing, movements in peripheral vision that vanished when observed directly. One page contained a detailed sketch of a geometric pattern that made my eyes water when I tried to trace its lines. The displacement is consistent, one entry read. Every reflection shows the same delay, as if the image needs a moment to catch up with reality. The mirror in the bathroom is the most obvious, but it's happening with all reflective surfaces. Even puddles on the street show this lag. Am I the only one seeing this? The second fragment arrived without warning while I was reading those notes. This memory was clearer, more visceral. I was in complete darkness, feeling along a wall that seemed to extend infinitely in both directions. Behind me, something was breathing, but when I turned toward the sound, the breathing stopped. Not gradually, not with the natural pause of held breath, but instantly, as if whatever was making the sound had simply ceased to exist the moment I acknowledged it. In this fragment, the air carried that strange scent I'd begun noticing in my daily life. new plastic and cold blood, sharp and organic at the same time. The wall under my fingers felt normal at first, but as I continued touching it, I realized the texture was changing, becoming softer, more yielding, until it felt disturbingly like skin. The power had gone out. This detail emerged from another fragment, triggered by the smell of ozone during a storm. I remembered being surrounded by the usual sounds of a functioning building, the hum of electricity, the whisper of air through vents, and then absolute silence as everything stopped at once. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of something else, something that had been there all along, hidden beneath the familiar sounds. In the darkness that followed, I heard footsteps that matched my own pace exactly, but came from a direction that should have been empty space. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they moved, but they weren't echoes. Echoes have a different quality, a hollowness that these sounds lacked. These footsteps had weight and intention. My investigation began affecting my present reality in ways I couldn't ignore. Reflections in windows showed me a fraction of a second behind my actual movements, as if the image needed time to process what I was doing. Sounds reached my ears with a delay that made conversations feel disconnected, words floating in the air before settling into meaning. I started noticing that electronic devices behaved strangely around me. The recording device would sometimes activate on its own, capturing minutes of ambient sound that, when played back, contained frequencies that made my teeth ache. My phone's camera would occasionally show interference patterns when pointed at empty spaces, geometric distortions that suggested something was there, just outside the visible spectrum. The most disturbing fragment came when I found a video file on my computer that I had no memory of creating. The footage showed my apartment from an angle that should have been impossible, as if the camera were positioned inside the wall. In the video, I watched myself moving through my daily routine, but my movements were wrong, too fluid, as if I were floating slightly above the ground. Halfway through the video, my recorded self stopped and looked directly at the camera. My face in the footage was my face, but the expression was one I'd never seen in any mirror. It was the look of someone who had seen something that fundamentally changed their understanding of reality. My recorded self mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I could read my lips well enough to make out the message. They're still here. The final fragment hit me while watching that video. Suddenly I was back in that dark space, but this time I could see. The room around me wasn't a room at all, but something that existed in the spaces between rooms, in the gaps that architecture leaves behind. The walls were covered with those moving lights, and I realized they weren't lights at all, but openings, windows into somewhere else entirely. In this memory, I was holding the recording device, speaking into it with desperate urgency, trying to document what I was seeing before it disappeared from my mind. But even as I spoke, I could feel the memories being carefully extracted, lifted away like pages being removed from a book. The process wasn't violent or painful, just thorough and inevitable. I remembered turning around and seeing them, figures that weren't quite figures, present but not entirely there, watching me with attention that felt like physical weight. They weren't hostile, just observant, studying me the way I might study an insect under glass. When I tried to look directly at them, they remained in my peripheral vision, always just outside direct observation. The strangest part of this final fragment was the realization that this wasn't the first time. The careful way they moved around me, the practiced efficiency with which they went about their work, suggested a routine. I had been here before many times, and each time I had forgotten, just as I was forgetting now. But something went wrong this time. Some details slipped through their process, leaving behind traces they hadn't accounted for. The recording device, the notebook, the video file, all evidence of encounters that should have been completely erased from my memory, and my environment. Now, as I piece together these fragments, I realize the investigation itself might be part of their design. Perhaps they want me to remember, partially, incompletely. Perhaps the gaps in my memory aren't failures in their process, but deliberate spaces left for me to fill with questions that have no answers. The notification light still doesn't blink. My reflection still lags behind my movements. The air still carries that scent of new plastic and cold blood, stronger now than when this all began. I find myself checking the recording device obsessively, waiting for it to activate on its own again, to capture sounds that exist in frequencies just beyond normal perception. Sometimes in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, I hear those layered voices again, speaking in unison about things I can't quite understand. They're discussing me, I think, evaluating the success of their work, noting the small imperfections that allowed me to remember fragments of what should have been completely forgotten. The most unsettling realization is that I'm not trying to escape or expose what happened to me. I'm simply documenting it compulsively, as if that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. The investigation feels less like my own choice and more like a program running in the background of my consciousness, executing instructions I don't remember receiving. I keep returning to that final fragment, to the moment when I saw them watching me. There was something almost familiar about their presence, as if I'd known them for much longer than just that encounter. As if they'd been part of my life in ways I couldn't perceive, invisible observers cataloging every mundane moment for reasons that remained opaque. The recording device activated again last night. This time it captured something different, my own voice, but speaking words in a language I don't recognize. The sounds were complex, layered with harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. When I played it back, I felt a strange recognition, as if I understood the meaning without knowing the words. I've started to wonder if the fragments I'm recovering are even memories at all, or if they're something else entirely, impressions left behind by experiences that exist outside normal perception. The details are too vivid, too precise for recovered memories, yet they feel more real than my daily experiences. The investigation continues, but I'm no longer sure who's conducting it. Each new piece of evidence I find feels less like a discovery and more like a revelation being carefully timed and placed for me to find. The notebook entries appear in my handwriting, but I watch my hand move across the page as if it's being guided by someone else's intentions. The most disturbing development is that I'm beginning to enjoy the process. The gradual revelation of impossible experiences, the slow reconstruction of encounters that defy explanation, has become addictive. I find myself hoping for new fragments, new evidence, new glimpses into that space between spaces where normal rules don't apply. But enjoyment might be the wrong word. It's more like recognition, as if I'm finally remembering who I really am, what I'm really part of. The person I was before the gap in my memory feels like a performance I was giving for an audience I couldn't see, playing a role in a story whose larger plot remained hidden from me. I've stopped trying to understand what happened to me and started trying to understand what I'm becoming. The changes aren't just in my perception or memory, they're in my fundamental structure, the way I exist in relation to the world around me. I'm becoming something that can perceive those spaces between spaces, something that can remember encounters that exist outside normal time and memory. The recording device sits on my desk, its small red light blinking in patterns that don't match any standard indicator sequence. I know it's recording something, but when I play back the files, they contain sounds that exist just beyond the range of my hearing, frequencies that I feel more than hear. Sometimes I catch myself speaking into the device without consciously deciding to do so, documenting observations in that same urgent tone I heard in the first recording. But now I understand the urgency isn't about preserving memories before they're taken away. It's about documenting the transformation while it's still incomplete, while I can still remember what it felt like to be entirely human. The investigation isn't ending. It's evolving into something else, something that doesn't require my conscious participation. I'm becoming both the observer and the observed, the investigator and the subject, the one who remembers and the one who forgets. And in the spaces between my thoughts, in the gaps between heartbeats, I can hear them still watching, still evaluating, still making careful adjustments to the process that's turning me into something new. What exactly am I becoming? Story 10. The initial assessment showed all windows latched securely. Furniture placement appeared untouched, with chairs aligned to the dining table and the sofa free of debris. A calendar on the wall noted dates without any markings beyond printed numbers. In the kitchen, utensils were stowed correctly, though a single plate remained on the countertop, devoid of residue. The refrigerator hummed at the expected decibel level, yet its contents failed to match inventory records. The hallway carpet was vacuumed, leaving uniform lines, yet the air felt colder than usual. The ceiling fan was off, but the blades rotated slowly. I woke up thinking about that plate, such a strange thing to dream about. The whole scene felt so clinical, so measured, like someone had been taking notes on my house while I slept. But it was just stress, I told myself. Work had been demanding lately, and my mind was processing the day in odd ways. The first dream was simple enough. I found myself standing in what looked like my bedroom, but the light was wrong. Instead of the warm glow from my bedside lamp, there was something else. An oval light, unmoving but pulsing like a breath, always above me. It cast no shadows, which should have been impossible, but dream logic has its own rules. I remember reaching toward the light, feeling my arm extend upward, but my fingers never seemed to get closer. There was a sound too, distant and constant. A hum, like someone was modulating a frequency only I could hear. Not unpleasant, just persistent, like white noise with intention. When I woke up, I dismissed it entirely. Dreams about lights and sounds seemed perfectly normal for someone who spent their days staring at screens and listening to the electronic buzz of modern life. The mind creates what it knows, I reasoned, nothing more than neural housekeeping. But the dream came back. The second time, everything lasted longer. The same bedroom, the same impossible light, but now I could feel the texture of the air around me. Thick, almost viscous, like breathing through silk. The humming grew more complex, layered with what might have been a voice. Metallic, distorted, speaking words just beyond comprehension. I strained to understand, tilting my head this way and that, but the meaning stayed locked away. The light began to move, not quickly, but with deliberate purpose, tracing slow circles above me. As it moved, I felt something I hadn't noticed before. I was being lifted, though no part of my body seemed to move. A sensation of weightlessness, of floating just slightly above whatever surface had been supporting me. My arms hung at my sides, completely relaxed, but I could sense the space beneath me growing. There was a smell too, sharp and clean, like ozone after a storm, but more artificial, chemical in its purity. It reminded me of hospitals, of laboratories, of places where everything must be sterile and controlled. I tried to speak in the dream, to ask what was happening, but my voice wouldn't come. Not because I couldn't make sound, but because the words felt unnecessary. As if whatever was happening already knew my questions and found them irrelevant. When I woke up this time, my mouth was dry and my sheets were soaked with perspiration. I checked the room carefully, looking for anything that might have triggered such vivid imagery. The ceiling looked normal, painted white with a small water stain I'd been meaning to fix. My lamp sat in its usual place, unplugged. The window showed the gray light of early morning, nothing unusual. But as I walked to the kitchen for water, I noticed the plate. It sat on the counter, clean and empty, exactly as I'd dreamed it. I didn't remember leaving it there. I rarely used that particular plate, a simple white ceramic piece that had come with a set I'd bought but never really liked. Yet there it was, positioned with mathematical precision in the center of the counter, as if someone had measured its placement. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. No residue, no marks, nothing to indicate it had been used. Just clean ceramic, slightly warm to the touch despite the cool morning air. The refrigerator hummed behind me, and I found myself opening it without really deciding to. The contents looked normal at first glance. Milk, leftover takeout, some vegetables that were probably past their prime. But something felt wrong about the arrangement. Items seemed to have shifted, reorganized according to some system I didn't recognize. The milk was on the wrong shelf. The vegetables were grouped in ways that made no sense. I closed the door and tried to shake off the feeling. Memory is unreliable, especially when you're half awake and thinking about strange dreams. People move things around their own refrigerators all the time without remembering. There was nothing sinister about a misplaced carton of milk. But the feeling lingered throughout the day, a sense of displacement, as if I were living in a house that looked like mine but wasn't quite right. The hallway carpet showed vacuum lines I didn't remember making. The ceiling fan in the living room was still, but when I looked closely, the blades seemed to be rotating almost imperceptibly, so slowly that I couldn't be sure if I was seeing movement or imagining it. The third dream was different, more vivid than reality itself, with colors that seemed more saturated and sounds that carried weight and texture. I was in the same bedroom, but now I could see beyond it. The walls had become transparent, revealing a space that extended infinitely in all directions. The oval light was still there, still pulsing with that steady rhythm, but now there were others. Dozens of them, arranged in patterns I almost recognized but couldn't quite place. The metallic voice was clearer now, though still incomprehensible. It spoke in measured cadences, pausing as if waiting for responses I couldn't give. The words had the rhythm of a conversation, but I was only hearing one side. The other participant might have been me, but I couldn't hear my own voice, couldn't feel my lips moving. Time moved strangely in this dream. I would focus on one of the lights, watching it pulse, and suddenly find that hours had passed, or what felt like hours. The quality of the space around me would shift, becoming brighter or dimmer without any apparent source of change. I had the distinct impression that I was being observed, studied, but not by anything I could see or identify. The sensation of floating became more pronounced. I could look down and see my body suspended in the thick air, arms and legs relaxed, head tilted back slightly, but the perspective was wrong. I was seeing myself from above, as if my consciousness had separated from my physical form. Yet I could still feel everything: the cool air against my skin, the gentle pressure of being lifted, the odd comfort of complete weightlessness. When I tried to wake up from this dream, nothing happened. I focused on opening my eyes, on moving my fingers, on breaking the spell of sleep, but the dream continued. The lights kept pulsing, the voice kept speaking, and my body kept floating in that impossible space. Eventually, consciousness returned, but I couldn't pinpoint the moment of transition. One instant I was suspended among the lights, and the next I was lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The water stain looked different somehow, larger than I remembered, with edges that seemed too precise to be accidental. That's when the contamination began. During the day, I would catch glimpses of light in my peripheral vision, quick flashes that disappeared when I turned to look directly. The humming sound would surface during quiet moments, so faint I couldn't be sure if I was hearing it or remembering it. Electronic devices began behaving strangely. My phone would display the time incorrectly, then correct itself when I wasn't looking. The television would change channels on its own, always to static-filled stations that shouldn't have existed. I started losing track of time in small ways. I would sit down to read and suddenly realize hours had passed without my awareness. I would begin preparing dinner and find myself standing in the kitchen with no memory of what I'd intended to cook. The sensation was similar to the time distortion in the dreams, but it was happening while I was fully awake. The boundaries between sleeping and waking began to blur. I would lie in bed, certain I was awake, only to find myself floating again among the pulsing lights. But now the bedroom beneath me looked exactly like my real bedroom, down to the smallest details. The books on my nightstand, the clothes draped over the chair, the pattern of shadows cast by the window blinds, everything was perfectly replicated. The voice became more insistent during these episodes, still metallic, still incomprehensible, but with an urgency that hadn't been there before. It would repeat certain phrases, or what sounded like phrases, with increasing emphasis. Sometimes I felt on the verge of understanding, as if the meaning were just beyond a thin barrier in my mind, but comprehension always slipped away before I could grasp it. I began to suspect that these weren't dreams at all. The consistency was too perfect, the details too precise. Dreams fade and shift and contradict themselves, but these experiences maintained their internal logic. The lights always pulsed at the same rate. The voice always had the same metallic timbre. The sensation of floating always felt identical. Something had happened to me, something my conscious mind couldn't access. The dreams felt like memories trying to surface, like experiences that had been carefully buried but were slowly working their way back to awareness. The clinical precision of that first dream, the way it cataloged every detail of my house, suggested an external observer. Someone had been taking inventory while I slept. But that was impossible. The windows were always latched, the doors were always locked. The security system showed no signs of intrusion, yet the evidence kept accumulating. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. Electronic devices malfunctioned in consistent patterns. The air in my house felt different, charged with a subtle energy that made my skin tingle. The dreams were becoming more frequent, sometimes occurring multiple times in a single night. I would wake up, check the surroundings, then drift back to sleep only to find myself floating again among the lights. Each episode felt like a continuation of the previous one, as if I were returning to a place that existed independently of my sleeping mind. The voice began to sound familiar, not because I recognized the words, but because the rhythm and inflection reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. Like hearing a song in another language that you've heard before but never understood. The familiarity was unsettling, suggesting a relationship I didn't remember forming. I started finding physical evidence that contradicted my memories. Small marks on my arms that I didn't remember getting. Tiny puncture wounds that healed too quickly and left no scars. My clothes would be arranged differently in the closet, organized according to some system I didn't recognize, but that felt oddly logical. The refrigerator inventory kept changing. Items would disappear and reappear, always in different locations. The milk would be fresh when I expected it to be expired. Vegetables would be crisp and green when they should have been wilted, as if someone were maintaining my food supply according to standards I wasn't aware of. The ceiling fan continued its imperceptible rotation, never speeding up, never stopping completely. I would stare at it for long periods, trying to determine if the movement was real or imagined. Sometimes I thought I could detect the motion, but other times it appeared perfectly still. The uncertainty became maddening, a constant reminder that I couldn't trust my own perceptions. Then came the night when everything changed. I found myself in the familiar floating state, suspended among the pulsing lights, listening to the metallic voice. But this time I could see something new. Below me, in what should have been my bedroom, there was activity. Figures moved with purposeful precision, examining objects, making notes, adjusting the placement of furniture. They worked in complete silence, communicating through gestures I couldn't interpret. The figures were indistinct, more like shadows with substance than actual beings, but their movements were coordinated, professional, as if they'd performed these tasks many times before. They handled my possessions with careful attention, returning everything to its proper place when they were finished. I watched them work, unable to move or speak, feeling like a specimen being studied. The voice continued its incomprehensible monologue, but now it seemed to be describing what the figures were doing. A running commentary on their activities, delivered in that same measured, metallic tone. When they finished their work, the figures gathered around something I couldn't see clearly. They seemed to be consulting instruments, comparing readings, making final adjustments to equipment that remained invisible to me. Then, one by one, they faded away, leaving the bedroom exactly as it had been. The voice spoke one final phrase, longer and more complex than anything I'd heard before. The words had the cadence of a conclusion, a summary, a final report. Then the lights began to dim, and I felt myself being lowered back toward the bed. I woke up in complete darkness, more alert than I'd ever been after one of these episodes. My heart was beating normally, my breathing was steady, but every sense was heightened. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, could smell the artificial ozone scent lingering in the air, could feel the slight warmth of the ceramic plate that I somehow knew was still sitting on the counter. But there was something else, something that shouldn't have been possible. On my nightstand, next to the lamp I never used, was a small device I'd never seen before. Rectangular smooth, with a single light that pulsed in the same rhythm as the oval lights in my dreams. It was warm to the touch, as if it had been operating for hours, and when I picked it up, it seemed to respond to my presence, pulsing faster for a moment before returning to its steady rhythm. The device was real, solid, undeniably present in my waking world. I set it back down carefully, afraid that handling it might make it disappear. But it remained there, pulsing quietly in the darkness, casting a faint glow that illuminated nothing but itself. The initial assessment showed all windows latched securely. Furniture placement appeared untouched, with chairs aligned to the dining table and the sofa free of debris. A calendar on the wall noted dates without any markings beyond printed numbers. In the kitchen, utensils were stowed correctly, though a single plate remained on the countertop, devoid of residue. The refrigerator hummed at the expected decibel level, yet its contents failed to match inventory records. The hallway carpet was vacuumed, leaving uniform lines, yet the air felt colder than usual. The ceiling fan was off, but the blades rotated slowly. But this time, as I stood in my bedroom, watching the device pulse with its steady rhythm, I noticed something that changed everything. The water stain on my ceiling, the one I'd been meaning to fix, was gone. In its place was a small, perfectly circular mark, smooth and precise, as if something had been carefully installed and then removed. The dreams were never dreams at all.